Okay guys, so in this video we are going to talk about status code, so let's get into it. What is a status code? Well, a status code is a code that you send basically to the client, and in that status code you have a semantic meaning to what happened in the request. So these are conventions that you can go out on the internet and read about, but I'll walk you through the most common ones in this video, and then in the next video we'll talk about some of the more obscure ones that are still useful to know but may not be as common. So the first status code that you will see, most common one, is 200. 200 basically means that, alright, everything is okay. That's all it means. It's just a convention for us to say that, hey, everything worked exactly as we wanted it to. So when you send, say, a put, and you say that, alright, I want to update, or I want to update a foo and set it to 1 or whatever, then you can reply by simply saying 200, that, yeah, everything worked perfectly. It's fine. You can also say that you're using a post, then you can use 201 in order to respond to basically when you have sent the request and then the server sends back a 201 header. What basically that means is that I created the thing that you wanted. So if, let's say that you have a subscription or a login form or something, a user is creating an account, then you would take the data from the client, which is like the username and all the personal information, and then you would create a record in your database, and then when you have created that record, you would send back the created record or whatever you want to send back and say 201, which means that hey client, I created your thing for you. Great. Now these once I want to just touch on this. You can return 200. Like, if you don't want to be semantic with your response codes like this, or your status codes, you don't have to. There's nothing stopping you from using whatever code you want, but you should know that it's good to at least think about the most common conventions. I mean, you don't have to use a 201, but it's always good to at least use a 200 or something, because depending on, we'll touch on that in just a moment, but some status codes ranges have very specific meanings. So 200 is usually different acceptance semantics, such that something was successful. But if you go to, say, 500 plus, that means that something went wrong on the server, or something has gone terribly wrong. 400 is usually something that has to do with there's some type of issue with either login credentials or that you can't find something. There's all kinds of different semantics. You can go and read about them. So it's good to at least be aware of some of these semantics. Okay, and then we could say do a delete request and say, and when the delete has happened, the server can respond with a 202, which means that I have accepted. So 202 means accepted. I accepted your request. That's one you can do. Let's say that you have a failure case. Let's say that we, as the client, we make a request to the server to a URL that doesn't exist. Well, then the server should return 404. This is something you probably have seen if you're a beginner, where you get a 404 page. What's that? Well, that means that you try to get to a URL on the server that doesn't exist. It can't find that path. That's all it means. And then maybe we have some critical error. Usually some sloppy programmer has done some bad thing on the server and something goes completely wrong. Then we would return a 500, because that indicates that there's a server error, or there's some type of unrecoverable error that was unforeseen, basically. And then we have this one, which is basically you can send back a 405, which means that, oh, you gave me the wrong method. So basically what we're saying here is that we could, as we saw here, let's see here, yeah, this one. So we can get /error, but we can't post to /error because there's no handler for using the post method to /error. So then the server could return 405, which is saying, as I said, I understand what you're trying to do, but hey, I don't accept that HTTP method. So let's just look at the server. So what we saw earlier here is that, okay, so we have a get endpoint, simple enough, we return 200. Same thing for our put method handler here, we simply return a 200 by convention. It could have been a 202 as well, to say accepted if you wanted to do that. And then we have a post where we can return 200 or 201. That's fairly standard depending on the semantics of what you do. As I said, you can use almost any status code you want. And then the delete, it's very common to have a 200 or 202. As I said earlier, 202 is just accepted. And then we have our little error endpoint here saying that, all right, if somebody goes to, you would never, of course, declare a route like this. Usually what happens is that you have an error handler or something in the server, so that when something breaks, you will simply send back for 500. And later in this series, we're going to talk about all of this stuff, so don't you worry. And then I've put this little thing here, which is app.all, which says that, all right, if I get here, because remember in Express everything flows like a list. So basically what's happening is that the request is matched against all of these handlers until it hits this handler. So first it's going to check if the /error request is a get method. If it's not, we will hit this handler that takes care of all the different methods. And then we're sending back 405 because we're saying that, hey, if you're not sending me a get, if it's a post or put or delete or something, I'm just going to send back 405 because I don't know what to do with that. And finally, if we make a request that doesn't exist in any of our little handlers here, we're going to send back the 404 by default. Express takes care. There are other things you can do with this, but you don't have to explicitly say that you want a 404 to go back. Now, there are reasons why you would want that, and we're going to talk about that in the future. But these are the bare bone basics of how basically the HTTP status system works. Have a great day.